On March 1st, 2024, Akira Toriyama passed away at the age of 68. His talent was well respected and appreciated amongst many in not just anime, but also video games. Having had his hands involved in various different video gaming projects, they would leave lasting legacies for years to come. Among those is for the RPG franchise Dragon Quest and Chrono Trigger, which many regard to this day as being one of the best RPGs of all time. But among the things that he's most well known for is one that many regard as being one of the best animes of all time, Dragon Ball. And with many popular IPs out there, video games would come along with it. Dragon Ball's earliest games were released for the Japanese exclusive Super Cassette Vision in 1986, one being named Dragon Ball Dragon Daiko. Since then, many games have been released for a variety of platforms, but there were some that either never got finished or undersold that even the Dragon Balls themselves couldn't fix. On this edition of the Uncommon Valley, we take a closer look at 3 Bandai projects that either were cancelled or just sold poorly. These are obscure Dragon Ball games. Made exclusively for the Japanese arcades in 1994, and would be produced using the Sega System 32 hardware. The thing that is unique about this cabinet is that there are 2 different known versions of the game. While originally intended to be played with its regular setup of a joystick and 3 buttons, they also made a deluxe version of the game to feature motion controls. This would be the same technology that would be implemented into Sega's Activator for the Sega Genesis and Mega Drive consoles. The game would be played with a small selection of characters from the Dragon Ball Z anime, and you would fight other various characters from the series. The game is played in a third-person style using 2D sprites, doing so while using sprite scaling to give off the illusion of it being in the 3rd dimension. After picking your character, you will then fight against other selectable characters with the game's limited controls. The game plays similar in the style of Punch-Out, where you attack the opponent with various different punches and a standard block button. It also gives the option to launch a Ki Blast for more ways to drop their health. This goes on until you've beaten everyone else on the roster, and then go to face off against the game's final boss, Majin Ozato. Once you beat them, your fighter will get a special ending based on the character that you chose. The working build of the game would be ready and showcased over at the Amusement Machine Show in August 26 of 1993. It would be here that Sega would show off its deluxe version of the game in a special dedicated Dragon Ball Z section of their booth. It would end up attracting a huge turnout and would be praised for its close to accuracy on motion controls. With enough interest being built up to play the game itself, it would be on the arcades over in Japan in March of 1994 under the official title Dragon Ball Z Virtual Reality Versus. It was also during that same year that Bandai would work on a port of the arcade game for the Panasonic's 3DO. Bandai felt it was the right hardware to bring such an arcade experience over to the home console market, and even showed off a working build of the game at the 3DO World Open Meeting Conference. This was to help attract potential buyers over in Japan, and the Dragon Ball Z VR vs. port was the main attraction for the show. It was here that the official title of the port was shown, known as Dragon Ball Z Cell to Kageki Da. Reports showed that while both were almost identical to each other, the spotted difference for the port was the final boss was to be Perfect Cell instead of Majin Ozato. Though an interesting fact is while the port would have the standard D-pad and button controls, the demo during the conference used boxing gloves to target Cell with. Interest seemed to have peaked with people who attended the show, but Bandai would quietly drop the project altogether later that year, stating that because of low initial sales numbers of the 3DO in Japan, they felt it would be pointless to bring over a popular IP to a console that wouldn't bring any fans over to an already dying platform. A very big reason why that was the case was that the 3DO was releasing the same year as the Sega Saturn, Sony's PlayStation, and even Neo Geo CD, along with 3DO's expensive sticker price of 79,800 yen, and would be a big contributing factor for the console altogether. but it is possible that it would have been released during the third or fourth quarter of the year. While Dragon Ball Z VR Versus is available on MAME, the same can't be said for the port on 3DO, but there might be a possible folder somewhere over in Japan that has a full complete build of the port, but for now we will never know. Bandai as of now has been known for many of their different popular releases in the modern video gaming landscape, but back then they threw their hat in the ring with their many different video gaming consoles. We will cover over those in a different video, but wanted to take a quick look at one of their failed units, the Design Master Senshi Manga Juku. Released in 1995, this console was basically a gaming tablet with a dedicated touchscreen, allowing the player to make around 6 frames of animation at a time, usually targeted towards 8-year-olds or older. This would predate other gaming touchscreen handhelds of that decade. Only 4 actual games were released for the system, one of them being a Dragon Ball game called Dragon Ball Z Taizengata Search Battle. At the start it contains 3 different modes, Story, Training, and a 2-player mode. When selecting Story mode, you will be greeted with 3 doors. From one of the 3 doors is where you will make your character, and you will be tasked with creating your own fighter by drawing in the left side of the screen with the design of your choice. After confirming the creation is done, it will assign different stats for your creation along with a special ability. You will then be asked to split the hit points of your character into various different squares on the screen. Once completed, you will go to fight with various different characters from the show. The game begins, and it is here where you will play in the style of Battleship. Once it confirms you hit the opponent, a smile will show up on screen, indicating that you targeted the right spot. Hitting it one more time confirms the square as a direct hit, and a skull icon will be replaced. If the opponent beats you, your creation will be wiped off the screen, and you will be booted back to the main menu and try all over again. While the game was creative on paper, this along with other software on the console would not drive interest to the Design Master Senshi Manga Juku hardware, due in part to there being low interest in the unit, and with there being far more interest in other handhelds such as the Game Boy and Game Gear. While it is thought that preservation for items such as these would be all but impossible, an individual by the name of Noah Bacon began to work on the hopeful prospect of being able to dump all the software online and hopefully being able to emulate for the near future. Nowadays, Bandai has made much better efforts of making Dragon Ball games for home consoles and PCs, but this having been the earliest depictions of game design shows how much they have improved over the years, and this console being nothing more than a bizarre footnote on their gaming design journey during the 1990s. Much like the other Bandai systems, it never made its way outside of Japan, and the console would be quietly discontinued 1 year later. Sometime in 1996, Funimation Productions obtained the licensing rights for Dragon Ball Z to release in English in North America. This decision came after they terminated their first attempt at dubbing Dragon Ball midway through their intended 26-episode first season. Funimation's release did not mark the inaugural broadcast of Dragon Ball Z in the United States, as certain networks had already showcased versions of this series in other languages on smaller scope. Funimation's initial English adaptation of Dragon Ball Z involved mandated edits to both content and length, condensing the first 67 episodes into 53. Interestingly, the aired TV episode 53 concluded halfway through the uncut episode of 67. The English dub of Dragon Ball Z would debut in the United States on September 13, 1996, through first-run syndication. However, production ceased in 1998 after the first 2 seasons, despite the series maintaining high ratings. Additionally, Pioneer discontinued the home video release of the series after Volume 17. Nevertheless, Pioneer did release uncut dubbed versions of the first 3 Dragon Ball Z movies over in the home video market. It was very apparent that Dragon Ball Z was picking up in popularity very quickly amongst its viewers, and questions started to be asked on if we will ever get games based on the hit series. It was then in issue 92 of Electronic Gaming Monthly that Bandai of America's associate producer Jeff Rotter answered a question asked from one of the magazine's readers if the Japanese exclusive Dragon Ball Z Legends would be brought over to the US. Jeff would go on to say that it is possible that it would be imported over for the English-speaking audiences, but wouldn't give any direct confirmation on if it would be for sale for the US market. But he would give readers hope by stating that negotiations were currently ongoing to bring a Dragon Ball game of some kind over, and they would update us in the possible future. That was when they would make an appearance at the 1997 Tokyo Toy Show to unveil a brand new game being released for the PlayStation 1, Dragon Ball Final Bout. The game would have a more than half-finished build of the game shown to the general public, and was less than 6 months away from its Japanese release. During the same show, there would be a demonstration shown for what was supposedly a motion-controlled game for the home console market. Footage showed off a person wearing Goku's outfit performing different moves from the anime, all the while using the same exact assets as from Final Bout. There was no word on if this was being made for both PlayStation 1 and Sega Saturn, or for any arcades and amusement parks, but it is to be believed that the technology would have been too expensive for consumers to get a hold of. Development for Final Bout was finished, and the official release date for the game would be in Japan on August 21st, 1997, and would sell around 245,000 copies over in the country. Sales were good enough for Bandai to reprint off copies of the game under the PlayStation Best for Family label sometime later. The European release would come around November 6th of 1997, namely in countries like France, Belgium, Spain, and Portugal, where it would also receive the same name as well. While it was looking as though North America would also be getting the game as well, changes would be made for the title. The new name of the North American release would be changed to Dragon Ball GT Final Bout, and it would become the first official Dragon Ball game to be released for them. Reviews for the game were mostly negative, giving off the most common of complaints of its pace being too slow, having a more than terrible camera, and a very lackluster combat system with delayed actions. Jeff Gertzman from GameSpot called it a visual spectacle, but found the game lacking in character differences when it came to combat. IGN's review left a harsh review for it, by stating it would be better off to just go buy the DBZ figures than to play this game instead. While Final Bout was on the receiving end of a lot of negativity as a fighting game, there's no telling how far discussions were made on Legends being ported over for the US market, considering that it was a much more polished game compared to what was made for Final Bout, and was actually like you were controlling an episode of the Dragon Ball Z anime. It is also not certain if the motion control tech demo was ever considered to be made for a video game, but it is a good possibility that it was quickly dropped due to consideration of cost for development, and might be frustrating for kids to play around with. Final Bout did in fact sell 245,000 copies in Japan. The same could not be said for the North American release. With Dragon Ball being very niche around that time, Bandai America only would produce 10,000 copies of the first print run, making it one of the rarest and hardest to find variants of a game for the original PlayStation. Reprints for the game would be made around 2000 over in Japan, 2002 for Europe, and then in 2004 for North America to coincide with the English dub of the Dragon Ball GT anime. While the games that were shown in this video were only just a fragment portion of Dragon Ball in the video gaming world, the number of games there outrivals even some of the biggest franchises out there. And with there being a brand new Budokai Tenkaichi game on the horizon, many fans of the anime will get to experience in a return to form fashion. Dragon Ball games have come a long way since the days of its 8-bit generation beginnings, but it seems as though there will not be an end to any companies making games anytime soon. Check out the other videos on our channel today for more obscure video gaming history, and thank you for watching The Uncommon Valley as we look to the past into the present.